Welcome back, everyone. I am so excited for today's interview. We are talking to a very special author. We are talking USA Today, New York Times, Wall Street Journal bestselling. I don't even know what's happening right now. We are very well known and loved for our very dark, emotional, and taboo reads. We are talking to the one and only Pam Godwin today. How are you?
I'm good. Excited to be here. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. I'm actually currently listening to your audiobook of Sea of Ruin, and I'm fangirling a little bit right now because I am so obsessed with the book, and I am just so excited to have you on and pick your brain about everything.
Yay. Thank you.
So take me back to the start then. What got you into writing, and how did you find publishing your first book?
I started writing when I was looking for a career change. So that was back in like 2008. I went to school for computer science. I was in the investment industry, and I had been. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of stress, and I was ready for something more relaxing. Writing is not more relaxing. Let me just tell you. But no, I'm an avid reader. I always have been. I've always read like daily. Like I don't go a day without reading. This is just since I started reading. So since a kid. So reading, like writing just seemed like the natural progression for me. Like I just went from reading to writing. I took a lot of classes, like 4 years of classes. So before I even published my first novel. And it was before like the whole indie kind of boom, before Amazon was really self-publishing. So my whole process was like write, edit, send, query agents, query publishers, and then write it, rewrite it, resend to agents. Like that was like a 4-year process. And then I decided to self-publish when I saw that everybody else was doing that. So that's it's been history from there.
And I guess that kind of in a full circle way was the best way, even though a lot of people, because I find that a lot of authors go into sort of wanting an immediate response, which is one thing that's great about independently publishing. But the problem is sometimes people dive into it too quickly, and they don't do enough research or have enough understanding of what's actually to be done. So how did you find the publishing process itself?
The self-publishing, just actually publishing the book was fairly easy. I mean, the hardest part was writing the book and then getting it edited and my first book I had edited so many times and rewritten. And so just putting it out on the web, just putting it out on Amazon and all the different publishers, like that was the easy part. It's getting people to read it after that. Like that's the hard part, right? Like the marketing and getting discovered, and I'm still learning that. I'm 12 years later, I'm still trying to figure it all out. Like and it's constantly changing, and it requires, like writers who tend to be more introverted to be more extroverted and promote their work. And that's just like out of our comfort zone, right? So yeah, I'm still learning that.
And what book was that? What was your first book that you published?
It was Dead of Eve. So it was a dystopian dark book. I am an avid horror reader, so I love horror novels. And I wanted a horror novel that had like romance and eroticism in it. And those were just really hard to find, especially back when I started writing, back in 2000, whatever, 2008. And I looked for that and couldn't find it. So I wrote that. But that is a very hard book to sell because romance readers don't want horror in their stories. Not a lot of romance readers. There's some weirdos out there like me, but most of it, most romance readers don't want that gory, scary, stomach churning like feeling all the time as they're reading their romance. And that's what I delivered with Dead of Eve.
What a debut.
Yeah, it's still my favorite book today. Like 30, almost 30 books later, it's still my favorite book.
Really? And would you say that's because sorry, you can see
Oh, I love it.
looking for attention. I want to hear about your new release, Lessons in Sin. Tell me what that's about. And it got received really, really well. Your readers love that book.
Yeah, it's that forbidden taboo age gap, student teacher, trope. And then I threw in a priest in there. So he's not just her teacher, he's also the Catholic school priest. And background on me was I was a Catholic school girl. I went to Catholic school. And, I was taught by nuns and priests. So I had like this, it's not a fantasy thing. I didn't really have that when I was a kid, but there's always like that forbidden kind of feeling that I had. And Catholicism is kind of a dark religion anyway. You sit in a dark booth and you confess your sins, and there's a lot of torture and stuff in the stories that they talk about. And so I just kind of incorporated all of that into this student, teacher, priest trope. So it is, very forbidden and taboo and probably offensive to a lot of people. And, I just love that. I love writing stuff like that. I love writing and pushing comfort zones. So,
yeah. I was about to ask you, is that one thing that you absolutely enjoy writing, is pushing boundaries, sort of seeing how far can I take this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do it just to like shock people. I don't like the shock value, but I like to read books that put me out of my comfort zone. So therefore I like to write books that put people out of their comfort zone. I like, and those books tend to be more memorable, right? So you're, even if you're like, in horror as you're reading it and it's uncomfortable and maybe not necessarily enjoyable all the way through, I do give it happily ever after. And I like it to, I try to make the story memorable, like doing certain things in stories so it stands out. Because a lot of there's so many books out there and a lot of them just start to blend together. And I like to try to be different. Different isn't always better. But I do try to be different.
I mean, I think you're doing really well with it. Being different is working great for you. You always try to thread through an element of romance as well. Have you ever thought about doing outright horror, or you love having that tension and chemistry and romance?
I do think about it. It would be like starting over in a career for me, because it would be a whole new audience, and it would just, I'd probably write under a different name. So it would be just like a brand new beginning. I don't know if I have the energy for that after writing for so long in this genre that I absolutely love. So I kind of feel like I'll just stick to what I really just am passionate about. And that is writing a romantic story and just making it really gritty and dark.
Yeah. So what does your writing process look like? Are you a plotter? Are you a pantser?
I'm a plotter. Since what I learned how to write thriller novels, like that's how I started out. I didn't learn how to write romance. I learned how to write. The classes that I took were all for suspense writers and thriller writers. So everything, every chapter ends on a cliffhanger. Like that's the kind of like suspense. In order for me to write like that, even if I'm not even trying, I have to plot. Like I just plot, and I like to write a lot of twists in. So I plot from beginning to end, every single book. If I'm, planning out a 9-book series, I'm going to plot every single book down to chapters before I even start book 1. So it's like an extreme plotter. It's crazy. And I have tried to write off the seat of my pants. Can't do it. Like I'll just sit there and stare at a blank page, and then I'll start because I like to write out of order too. I like to write ending chapters and middle pieces, and whatever I'm feeling at the moment, that's what I write. So I can do that and just plug it all into my outline. I love that.
So how long would you say it takes you to write a book? Do you sort of have a regime, like I will write 9 till 5? What does your day-to-day look like?
It's been changing. I've been trying to change it because I was writing like 20 hours a day, 20 to 22 hours a day, which is a ridiculous amount of time. I let it kind of take over because I love it. I love doing it. And when I really get into it, I don't want to stop. Like my mind doesn't stop. So even if I walk away from my laptop for a couple hours and still thinking about it, I can't even have a conversation with somebody. So it's my writing process is I usually spend like a month outlining and plotting. And once I get the entire manuscript set and exactly how I want it, then it'll take me like 2 to 3 months after that to actually write the book. And I write really long books. Like I don't write, short 50,000 books. I'm writing an entire story in one book. Almost all my books are standalones. So the writing, the obsession that I've started, like it's just not healthy because I'm not sleeping. And this has been going on for like a decade. So I have this year made a huge change in stepping back and writing and taking my time. That just means you're going to get less books from me a year, but I'm really enjoying this time, just taking my time writing. Like I mostly write at night because inspiration doesn't hit me at 7 in the morning. So I do business stuff at 7 in the morning, and then, I work, I paint my tiles or whatever I'm doing during the day in the household. And then at night I write. And there's also reading too. So
yeah, because
that's my process.
It is a very, I remember when I first started as well, it's very consuming because as soon as you publish your first book, you don't know what comes over you because you're learning so much, you're absorbing so much, and it's all you find you're YouTubing this or you're looking up this and you're
Yeah.
writing this because you're so in love with the process.
Yes.
But as you said, it's definitely unhealthy at the best of times. The amount of conversations I've had with authors who admit it's an unhealthy relationship sometimes because we're so in it all the time. So I think that's really brave of you actually to try to step back, especially when you've been in the habit of doing it for 12 years. And I think it's good too that sort of obviously you're releasing a lot of books which your readers would have loved, but having that communication with them as well. So, and I've been noticing that a lot lately in the industry that authors have been saying, guys, sorry, I need to slow down a little bit. I'm really fatiguing. I'm really tired. I'm trying to like produce all of this for you, but I'm just tired now. Like we're humans too. So
Right.
I think that message is coming across strongly at the moment as well.
Yes, I agree. And I think that recharge is really necessary too for quality. Like when an author steps back and really recharges, I think you come out back out of it with a much better, higher quality story. That just for me, that's my opinion.
Speaking of high quality story, I don't want to pinpoint just one book, but I am going to because I am currently obsessed with Sea of Ruins right now. And honestly, I am not usually standardly a dark or a taboo reader or anything like that. But your writing is phenomenal.
Thank
And
you.
I'm about halfway through now. I'm so obsessed. I'm listening to my onto my audiobook when I walk my dog or when I'm going to and from work. And so I'm curious as to where you got that inspiration and how you found writing historical romance on the sea. I imagine a lot of research would have had to be put into that.
So much research. Just researching the language, like learning how to speak like, a person in the 1700s. The words we use today don't have the same meaning back then. So how I would normally just write and let it flow, that doesn't work. Like I would double check every single word I put on the paper just to make sure it had that meaning back then. I didn't make assumptions. I was overly anal about the accuracy of it. But the research was, just researching battles at sea and researching clothing and weapons and just tools that everyone used and just the way that the society was in the culture. Pirate culture is a whole thing. Like I read a lot of like documents, pirate documents and stuff that were written back then. I really fell in love with the research, which is why it took me a year to write that book, because I was just so like in it. I felt like I could actually like captain a pirate ship by the time I was done. I felt like I could do it. Like I knew all of the terminology and everything that had to be done to get it out on the sea.
Yeah.
So I've been asked a lot to write, a follow-up to Sea of Ruin. There's a lot of characters that you've met, right? It's side characters in there. So to write their love stories, and I would love to do it. And I do plan on doing it, but I just need a year. I need a year to like sit down and do it. And I have a lot of things planned already. So it's going to be a while, but it will come. I will definitely do it again.
I would agree that you probably can run a pirate ship right now because and that's like your writing in it is so, as you said, the language is so on point and definitely takes you back to the 1700s and just how, but what I also loved about it is you do have sort of a modern message and twist on it, whereas because obviously in the 1700s women's position were
Right.
not strong positions, and you've really encapsulated that with the modern twist of what we stand for today, of questioning that and of saying just because you're a man it doesn't make it any different. Like very few would have spoken up, I imagine, in that time.
Right.
I love that you.
Yeah, that's why I wrote her as a pirate's daughter. That I've never been able to like tackle historical romance just because women are just so put in their place. And while I know it happened and I understand it, I think I would have a very hard time writing a character that way, where she's just like, yes, sir, this is my role. I have to stay a virgin until marriage. And like, you're gonna marry me off. My virtue's so important. Like when I tackled historical romance for the first time, I was like, there's no way I can write that. Because none of my heroines are that way. My heroines are always very tough and strong, and very rare are they virgins even. Like I just write older, like more dominating women. That's why I started with a pirate's daughter. Like I was just like, I don't know how to do this any other way to make it make sense in the era.
And it's so very detailed too. What I loved was there was a part there that was honestly lost on me in a good way. When you're like, and then he was up at this part of the ship and this, and you were using all the correct language. And I was just like, I don't know what any of that is because I have not really been on a pirate ship. I know it's a surprise, but it was just so, you could tell that a lot of research has gone into it. You definitely encapsulate that time period.
I tend to go overboard. That happens. But I also try to like make it so that it makes sense in context. So even if you don't understand the terminology, you understand what's happening in context of the story.
Yeah. And it was the same thing. I knew what was happening, but I was so in awe going, I don't know what any of this is, but that's amazing. How do you find inspiration for your characters? Because I love how diverse your characters are. So how do you sort of get a small concept of this will be this person and then their characteristics building? Because if you're a plotter and if you plotted this for how long did you plot Sea of Ruins for?
I probably spent a couple months just plotting it. And it's like the length of 3 books. So it's a long one. And when I plot, I don't necessarily know the characters. Like I know their personalities. I know what they look like. I know what their goals are, what are their weaknesses and strengths. Like I know those things, but I don't know them. I don't really know them until I put them in the book and like throw conflict at them. Like you don't really know a person until they react to conflict, right? Like that's when a person's true colors come out. So for my characters, especially my heroines, I actually base them on real life people in my life. So my girlfriends, my sisters, my daughter, like grandparents, like people who I have interact with and know very, very well, that's who I base my characters on. So that's why they might all feel a little different because they're all just different people in my life.
One thing that I also love that you've thrown in there is that, and I'm not going to give anything away as to what it is, but trauma. And obviously in the 1700s, I feel like you've done it well because it's still raw in its rawest form, but you've detailed it. Like it's a weird one to balance, I find these days, because you need trigger warnings for books and things like that these days. So I think you've balanced it really well where you have gone into detail. And at first I was like, okay, this is happening, like this is where we're going, but I couldn't stop reading it either because it was so authentic as well, and it really helps when you're watching it feels like I'm watching it, but when you're reading the rest of the story, the things that trigger them, the things that, because they do all have a mask on, they're very strong, they're pirates, they can't let anyone break in, but then you see those bits of heartbreak and trauma come through, and that's when they re-spark, and it's very animalistic in how I imagine someone would react in those situations. So I feel like you've done that very well as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't tend to hold back too much. Like I said, I don't do things for shock value, but I also don't like sugarcoat things either, and especially like in the 1700s and the way women were treated and slaves were treated. I didn't hold back on that. I didn't like super highlight it and make it like a huge part of the story because that's not what the story was about, but I did want it in there because it was there so prolifically there in the 1700s. But I found that a lot of historical romance readers came to read this book and were completely horrified by it because it's just, this stuff isn't in historical romance. Romance is there for an escape, an enjoyable entertainment. And then I throw out Sea of Ruin and put all of my my dark writing in there. If this is the first dark book of mine you've read, you're in for a shock if you read my other stuff. Because I do have a lot darker books.
So then I am curious as to what your favorite book has been to write and why.
I think it was my first book, Dead of Eve, because it just incorporated all of my favorite things, horror and erotica and romance. A love story is just so overwhelmingly deep and just hard one, just extremely hard one. It's the whole series. It's a whole trilogy. And the second book is like, I don't know, 800 pages. It's ridiculously long. It's just the world building it's my favorite thing. Like I like to create worlds, like the pirate world. I mean, that was based on history, but it was still kind of my own making. Like, I love to create universes and worlds and just make up all of my own rules. And that's totally what the Eve trilogy is to me. Like, it's just my own world. It's dystopian. It's like, what does this world look like after, the apocalypse?
Personally, like I thrive and love writing world building. So my question to you is, do you enjoy challenging the modern what if? So when you're like, what if this happened? What if that happened? And twisting it in your own style, because I find a lot of people, especially who write dystopian, sort of have I'm not going to say a political stance or anything like that, but we really look at what humanity is now and question, but what if? And we highlight issues that we have now and what our ignorance could lead to if these things happen.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that is like my Eve series. Like, it was totally my what ifs. In fact, when I started writing, someone told me to write what scares me the most. Like, what is my biggest fear? Well, for me, and when I started writing, my children were really young. They're like they're like moving out of the house now, but they were like toddlers back then. And my biggest fear was losing them dying, or losing them, trying to keep track of them in an apocalypse situation. Like, it's a crazy scenario, but those were my biggest fears. So that's what I wrote in that series. Like, I just sat down and wrote it and cried for years while I was writing it because it was so devastating.
Oh my goodness. So speaking then of mentors, who did you find that mentored you when you were starting out as a baby author in the big publishing world?
So as far as like the writing process, like who mentored me in the writing process, or like an author that I was reading? Is that
Both? Yeah, both.
Okay. So many authors like I looked up to and loved as I was reading. When I started writing, Laurel Kate Hamilton, she writes this vampire series, this vampire hunter. She was really like my firstborn inspiration to start writing, because she just had this like super sexy romantic like 20 book series. I mean, I was reading it as she was releasing the books. I think she's still writing in it. The Anita Blake series. And I was just so in love with the way that she wrote this heroine who was just so like crazy badass, and just all the men loved her, and she knew her weapons. She was just, like she had fear, but she still like fought through it. And I don't know, I just love urban fantasy books like that. Jacqueline Carey is another one. She wrote The Crucial's Legacy. It's like alternative history and fantasy, and it's just very erotic and sexy and emotional, and it has like the best hero ever in it, and heroine. So I think reading these stories like inspired me so much just as a reader. It made me want to write that good. Like, I wanted, and that's still my goal today, is just to write like they write, like to write books that move people. You know what I mean? As far as like my mentors in real life, I started out in a critique group online. And so it was just filled with mentors, like tons of people. Probably like 100 people have mentored me through the years, just sitting down, critiquing my work online. I critique theirs. We learn from each other. The online critique group is like, for any new writer, it's my biggest advice is to just find an online critique group, or use the one that I use, which was critiquecircle.com. It's still out there. It's based in Iceland, of all places. And I found so much help and advice there. The people there like are so passionate about the craft of writing, and I found my passion there as well. So
when you start on this journey, very quickly you find yourself in a group or in a tribe, so to speak, that really just supports you and makes you fall in love with the industry, because you never realized you were going to find that friendship or love or support when you first stepped into it.
Yeah.
I would love to know. So you are a USA Today, New York Times, and Wall Street Journal bestselling author. I would love to know the moments when you found out you're on the list, and most importantly, how you celebrated them.
I didn't really celebrate. Like, I know I'm probably, this is an unfavorable response, probably. It was never one of my goals to be on a list. So for me, in my mind, like being on a list is it shows that you're really good at marketing your brand, because to be on a list, you have to sell a certain number of books in a week. So this isn't really running on, like word of mouth recommendations. It shows that your marketing is really working really well. And from my standpoint, I don't care about my marketing. I know I should, and I do put a lot of effort into it, but it's not where my passion is. So if I were to, and I've never done this, but if I were to have gotten on a list for week after week after week after week, and not it had not been a sale, because a lot of times, you get on these lists when it's a sale price on a book and you're just selling a lot of them in a short period of time. That's not a measure of success for me personally. Like I'm not downplaying it at all, because a lot of authors work their butts off to get this, and it pays off for them, and it's awesome and super successful. For me, I would need to be like on a list over and over and over again, like the same book for a while, to show that it's a word of mouth and it's actually my book that's selling it. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Like, I know that's probably a really unpopular response. So I didn't really sell. I celebrate when I finish a book. I celebrate when I put it out there and I'm not like a bawling mess, like, this is my baby, I've done it. Those are like huge celebrations for me. And really, like, I just sit down with my husband and like have a glass of wine and relax. Like, it's so rewarding to just finish a book and put it out there for people to read.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a great thing about having these interviews, is everyone has different goals. Everyone has different versions of success. So I love that yours is literally every release and seeing that consistency of readership as well. I absolutely adore that. Speaking of marketing, then we're going to get into the tough questions.
I hate it.
And marketing is such a fickle one, because different things work for different people. You learn bits and pieces everywhere. So I was curious as to what your 3 must-dos are on every release. What have you found that's worked for you?
I think the absolute must is to send out advanced reader copies. Like, send them out to readers, your fan base who already love you, but then also like new readers who might be new to, like, when I put Sea of Ruin out, most of my readers weren't reading historical romance. So just giving that to readers who read mostly contemporary, like just getting their take on it. I think it's really important for pre-release buzz. Like, when people are reading it ahead of time and then they start talking about it, hopefully, like they're, all excited, and that gets everyone else excited. That would be like my biggest number one thing to do for a release. Also, creating teasers, graphics, like different things work for different consumers, and having the right like imagery with the book to kind of, because a lot of people don't have time to sit and read through blurbs and like, figure out like reviews, if this worked, or this did, if this is a book for them or not. A lot of times just teasers and graphics are really just a quick, like, this is sexy, or this is gory, or this is, this is a vampire. Like, you can just make them right and capture attention. Otherwise, like, staying on your promises. Like, if you promise a release date on this day, deliver on that day. If you promise your book's going to be a standalone, deliver a standalone. Like, just, I think that's super important for releases. Always just don't like surprise your readers. Make sure that you follow through on all the promises you made to them up until release.
When Sea of Ruin did come out, it was everywhere. I saw it everywhere on Instagram and Facebook, and the graphics were beautiful. And it just goes to show, too, the power of that, because that really stuck with me. It wasn't until about a year later, as of now, that I've actually my TBR is long, like everyone's.
Oh, yeah, I totally get that.
I remember that momentum, that build-up of its release, because it's just everywhere. So it just goes to show the power of that kind of marketing as well.
Right.
And obviously
having a good cover. I think for Sea of Ruin, I think it got a lot of attention because it's just a gorgeous cover. Like, it just is absolutely gorgeous. Now, a lot of people went into it looking at this gorgeous cover, and then they got a lot of dark stuff they didn't expect. So that was maybe some, maybe a mistake on my end, but I still would never change the cover ever because I just love it. But yeah, I think the cover is super, super important, and that will actually help like build up a release.
I think it's a beautiful cover, and I think too you have many reviews on it, so I'm sure that if people skim past it, they will find out very quickly that it has a darker tone, which is amazing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, just go read all the 1-star reviews. Seriously.
I'm not gonna lie, I did. No,
Okay.
not in
Yeah,
that.
no, you'll
I
find
scrolled
out.
through a couple, and I was like, okay, yeah, right, I could see how, but it sums it up
Yeah,
really well as well. So I guess in a way, on the flip side, sometimes as authors, we are grateful for the 1 or 2 stars because
right,
it does really convey some of the topical issues that people might have, I find.
right. Yeah, and I don't put disclaimers in my books because I've gotten burned that way. I think disclaimers do a couple bad things. Like I mean, I think they're needed sometimes, but and I write really dark stuff, but I feel like this, well, first of all, disclaimers get me banned a lot. Like you have to be really careful with the wording and put them in, like maybe in the preface of the book and not on the actual product page of, like on Amazon, but you have to be really careful with those trigger warnings. You don't want to put about big red flags for the retailers and say, ban me, ban me. But the other thing too is like triggers are subjective, right? So different people have different triggers. And if you say, blatant, this is dark, it's going to be too dark, or it's, be warning, then the dark romance readers are going to come in and be like, oh, yay. And then they'll be like, if it's not dark enough, like, why did you warn me of this? This isn't dark enough. So I don't know, like set expectations that are just really hard to, like, because it's so different for every person.
Now, you are a world traveler as well. So I would love to hear about where your favorite places are and why, and if you think that traveling has really enriched your writing.
I would say Australia, and I'm not doing that just to like because
Yes!
you're there. I do really just, I mean, who goes to Australia doesn't love it? Just the people, the countryside. I will never look at the stars the same way again. Like there's something about seeing a field of kangaroos and their eyes twinkling like stars under an Australian skyline full of stars. Like I can't describe that. And I'm a writer and I can't describe that scene. Like just seeing that. Iceland, like again, it's out in the middle of nowhere, like glaciers everywhere. There was just something very spiritual about being in Iceland that I absolutely loved. I just got on a horse and like rode off and in the woods and glaciers, and I don't know, it was just a fantastic experience. Japan also, I love Japan. It's just I don't know, it's really hard to name my favorites, but those would be my top 3. And inspiration, oh yeah, like totally, like just less about scenery, I think, than just people and culture. Like all the different people, I get so inspired by meeting different types of people and different cultures and different lands and cities, countryside, everything. Like everybody is different, and characters are born when I run into people like that, like just different people that don't live around me.
You have your books translated into 7 languages, which is amazing. And you also have audiobooks too. So I was curious as to how you found those processes. Did you outsource it for like elsewhere, or were you very hands-on with the process of it all?
No, I had an agent who did a lot of it, started it out for me, which was super helpful because I was not taking the initiative on any of that. There's enough to do just like getting your ebooks in English published. So she kind of just ran with it. So she got me a lot of different contracts in foreign publishing, and then I moved into audio that way. So all of my audio and foreign books are all published through traditional publishing. So I really don't have to do anything. I just have my agents do it and the publishers. It's really nice.
And is Sea of Ruin traditionally published?
Sea of Ruin is traditionally published for foreign language and audio.
Okay,
so I try to retain my rights on all of my English ebooks because I know how to do that and I'm good at it. I feel like I'm good at like controlling that and like knowing what to do with it. I don't need a publisher to tell me what markets to put it in or whatever. Lessons in Sin I did write that for Dangerous Press. So Dangerous Press owns Lessons in Sin. It's part of their Midnight Dynasty world. Did you know that?
Oh.
So they have an entire world. Dangerous Press is a small boutique publisher who has an entire world called Midnight Dynasty, and they have all these authors who write characters all in the same kind of world. So I wrote Lessons in Sin as part of that world. They can all be read as standalones. Each author's books can be read individually by themselves, or you can Like any of the characters that you read in Lessons in Sin are likely written by other authors in the world. It's very cool.
That's so cool. And a lot, I guess you'd have to be a little bit more thoughtful too, because you would have read other people's books and gone, yeah, I'll throw that character in, or I'll
Yes.
throw this character in. That's really cool. Have you done many sort of collaborations or anthologies or anything like that?
Yeah, I do anthologies quite often. Like I like to write short stories, like maybe prequels or epilogues to books I've already written, and put those in short stories. They're really good teasers to draw people into, my world of standalones. So since I write mostly standalones, I don't have that like feed through. So I love writing anthologies. Like I just actually wrote a Christmas short story for the couple that are in Lessons in Sin. So the priest and his girl are in a short story in a Christmas anthology that the publisher just released. So I love doing stuff like that. It's fun.
Congratulations. That's so exciting. What's the anthology name for that one?
It's called Meet Me Under the Mistletoe. There's 15 stories. It's all brand new content and it's free.
Do you do a lot of conventions and signings?
I used to before the pandemic. Yeah, I used to travel like twice a month. I used to travel either I do a lot of writing retreats. I love because, it's just such an isolated job. I love like sitting with writers. There's just something about sitting in a room with writers and you're all writing and collaborating and talking about the business or just writing quietly next to each other. I love that. So I used to do like probably 6 of those a year. And then I would do like 6 or 12 signings a year, but that's changed,
No. What would you then say that your most memorable reader interaction moment has been?
I would say it's my very first book. When I was writing my first book, I was a reader on Goodreads. So I had like the whole reading community that was friends of mine. We were all reading the same books. And then I announced to them that I was writing a book, and the amount of support that I got from my Goodreads friends, women that I had never met in person, just, scattered all over the world. I actually, to this day, am still extremely close to 2 of them. In fact, we have like matching tattoos. Like we have met in person now. We all live in the United States. So we've met in person multiple times. We have matching tattoos. And this all came from them being a reader on Goodreads with me and them reading and supporting my first book. Like it's just, it's such a memorable thing. Like I'll take it with me for the rest of my life. It's amazing.
And what's the tattoo? What like
the tattoo is I have a lot of tattoos going on here, but this one is a book and it has all of our initials kind of floating out of it and then turning into birds going on along the side.
I love that.
Yeah, so all 3 of us have the same tattoo. We got him like probably, I don't know, 4 years ago. We just met in Florida and got it done.
What has been your greatest challenge and your greatest accomplishment so far in your writing career?
So greatest challenge is marketing. Just getting out there and, talking about my books. It's very hard for me to do. Like I'll talk about other people's books all day long. So like even these interviews, I love doing these, but I would rather talk about someone else's books than mine. So that's a challenge for me. I feel like my greatest success is probably just releasing, actually finishing books and releasing. I think I'm like at number 28 now, all of the books like that. You write, so like just finishing a book is a very difficult thing. It's scary to put it out in the world after you finish it. So I mean that's a success to do that 28 times or however many times I've done it.
And I think one thing that we have to remind ourselves too is, there was a patch where I did it, where after you get past like book 20, you kind of, I don't want to say desensitize, but you forget about how amazing every release is, because by that point you've become somewhat experienced and you're used to that. Okay, this is what I do for work. Like here we are, another book. Yes, that's awesome. And it was only this year that I kind of reality hit again. That I was like, this is phenomenal. Like I need to celebrate every single one, because the fact that I've gotten to this point. And I wonder if you've gone through the same stage.
Yeah, I think I feel it more when I'm doing it quickly, like when I'm releasing like a book a month, which I was doing through the pandemic, and I was writing like a book a month, which is so much for me. It's too much. I was feeling very like I didn't have time to enjoy it because I had to start the next book, right? So, and I think you do get desensitized, and you're kind of and you miss like what are you really doing here? Like where you lose the passion, and then the burnout can happen there, which is why I have stepped back this year, and it has made all the difference in the world. It really has. Step back and appreciate what I've done, take my time doing the next thing, enjoying life. Like that's how lucky are we to get to write and do this. And like I feel bad even ever complaining about it because I just absolutely love it. And I just, am so thankful every single day to be able to do this.
Absolutely. And I think I want to put out there too, it's never so much that we're complaining about it. It's just more so we want to give it the very best. So
Right.
sometimes we find there's a lot of pressure and we
It's
have
hard.
yeah,
It's so hard. It is just it's the hardest thing I've ever done. And I had a very difficult career before. So this is just it's also very rewarding. It can be.
absolutely. Then this is my favorite question to ask. What is the goal? What is the dream that you are chasing for your career?
I want to be good at what I'm doing. And I want to be good enough to have someone like it's just such a lofty dream. Don't laugh at me. But I want to be good enough to have like a Stephen King, like put his name on my book. Like this is a great book. Outstanding. She knows what she's writing. Just something, a blurb. I want someone like Stephen King has always been like my go-to. Like, I just want you to just read one of my books. So that's a goal. Like I want to be known as being good at writing, not good at marketing, not good at smiling for a camera. I want to be known as good as, even if it's long after I'm dead, just she knew how to write a book. That's my goal. Like,
All
I want to
right.
learn how to
Well,
do that.
I'm going to send a strongly worded email to Stephen King and be like, boy, you need to read Pam's book. Come on now. Get with the times.
My best friend emails him all the time.
Does she?
I mean,
That is a
oh
good
yeah,
best friend.
I know she's probably falling in a spam folder at this point.
You got to keep shooting your shot. And you know what? It's the same with querying though. You shoot your shot 100,
Right.
1,000 times, however, and then until the right champion comes along. So maybe
That's right.
email 101 that he
Yeah.
reads. I have a little segment called Speed Dating with an Author. So you and I are going to go on a very romantic date. I lit a candle, I've created ambience, and basically what it is 5 rapid questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Fabulous. What is the clumsiest moment you've ever had?
The what?
Clumsiest moment you've ever had?
Uh, putting a screw through my finger when I was like I it was a screw and a screwdriver, like an electric screwdriver. I screwed it right through my fingers. I actually have a bruise right here. I'm a very clumsy person. I shouldn't say this on a speed dating date, but I just fall down all the time and bruise myself anyway.
Sounds like possibly liability. How was your finger? Did it go all the way through or?
Yeah, it just left a big hole and a scar, and it's fine. Like you can't tell it now. This was like probably a decade ago.
What is the 3 words that would best describe you?
Stubborn, weird, insomniac.
I was going to ask that if you we have somebody joining us. I was going to ask if you have someone if you ever slept, because when you're saying before that you work 20 to 20 like 20 hours writing. Yes, yeah, I see you. 20 hours writing. Obviously you don't sleep that much.
It's weird. It's not healthy. It's not good.
No, but you still have a glowing complexion, so well done.
Thank you.
What is the song that best describes you?
Swing Life Away by Rise Against. It also happens to be one of my favorite songs, but it's just the lyrics in the song and just sitting on the porch and trying to enjoy life, and it's romantic. It's a romantic song. It's just everything about the song, I think, describes me, my personality, or maybe the things that I want.
Yeah. Do you listen to music when you write?
I listen to like lo-fi beats, like it's kind of a study kind of, do you know what that is?
Do you listen to them on YouTube?
It's Spotify, mostly Spotify.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, I just need quiet. But the lo-fi stuff is really good for concentration. I love that.
Okay, amazing.
If I was listening to a song that had fantastic lyrics, and I would just be so absorbed in the song, I wouldn't be able to focus on writing.
Yeah, I find the same too. I can't have words, but I can do sort of background music. But if there's words, I'm gone because it just grabs my attention. What is your life motto?
It is what it is.
I think the Australian version of that is Chilby, right?
I love it.
What is a unique talent or skill set that you have that not a lot of people know about?
Oh, well, it's not a secret, but I don't sleep. So I think that's a talent. Like it makes me very productive. I can go like 4 days without sleep and not really miss a beat. I do start getting really clumsy after like day 3. Like I lose coordination and end up with bruises and stuff. But
have you always had that?
Yeah, I've always probably, yeah. It's just, especially when I'm really writing, like in deep in plot, I can't turn it off. Even to sleep, I can't turn it off. It's crazy. I don't know. And I've taken stuff, like I've taken, natural herbs and melatonin and things like that to try to like ease my mind. Lots of wine before I go to bed. It's just, I cannot turn it off. I just can't. It just, yeah. So, but I also see it as a talent because I can get a lot done. I can get a lot done, especially after like day 3 or 4 of not sleeping, because there's something that happens, like a switch in your brain where you kind of turn off any kind of self-editing mode, and editing, there's no self-editing, there's no like doubt, there's no anything. You're just like moving in a fog, and I can really pound out a lot of awesome stuff through that time. It's weird.
And I know a lot of authors who are watching this are wondering, if I had that, how much work could I get done?
It's absolutely miserable though. It's miserable because when you want to sleep, anyone who has insomnia will understand this. Like when you want to sleep and you cannot, it is the most frustrating thing. Like it's just because there's no fix and you can't figure out, like, you can't do anything. You're laying in bed or you get up and you wander. It's just a weird thing. It's a weird thing to have. So there's good things with it and bad things, but mostly bad things because it's really not a healthy thing.
She says as she smiles. It's not great.
I get a lot done.
I have had such a good time. What do we need to know that's coming up? Where do we find you? Or should I say, where do we stalk you?
I'm all over social media. I mean, I'm on Instagram the most. Like my personal stuff is, more about me is on Instagram. I just love Instagram. It's drama free. I'm on Facebook, TikTok. I'm really not good at TikTok though, because I think I'm just like out of that age range, What I have coming up is a trilogy, dark romance. I'm not announcing anything beyond that because I am like taking my time. I am writing this until next year. Like I am putting everything I have into this story and I freaking love it, but no announcements until next year. So it's coming sometime next year, a trilogy. I'm going to write it all before I even release it.
Do you have a Facebook reader group?
I do. It's called Read Between the Wines, and I share it with another author, Lydia Michaels. I'm really like not on Facebook a lot, so it super helps me when I have like another author to kind of help me like maneuver through Facebook. But yeah, it's there. Read Between the Wines, and I have a Facebook page, Facebook profile. I'm all out there under Pam Godwin.
I'm definitely going to be joining. And just out of curiosity, are you a red or a white wine drinker, or both?
Both. I'm not picky. I'll drink it all.
I love that. That is the correct answer.
Right?
I have had such a good time. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast.
Absolutely. And who knows, watch your space. Maybe I'll be able to get you back on next year.
Okay. Just hit me up.
I love it. All right. Well, have a good one, Pam, and I'll talk to you later.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.